Son, he said, I've come to take you home. Son, he said, I've come to take you home. No, that's the wrong one, buddy. There you go, right there. Change that. Graham and Gessler. All right, we're almost ready, bruv. Oh, man. Son, he said, I've come to take you home. Make sure this is good. Then we shall proceed. Proceed to fine. There we go. We shall proceed, bruv. Get the chat up. The World of Keane by Walter Keane. He was the purported painter of the sad eyes, or big eyes, whatever the fuck it was called, paintings, but it turned out that it's supposedly his wife, Margaret, was the big eyes after all, but who knows? I think the whole thing's a fraud. I think they might have even been in a conspiracy. Chapter 11, Renee. In Paris again with Colette and Renee at my side, I was inspired. Soon Renee was in school and I was busy painting. Colette would plan some little activity for the two of us each day: lunch, a walk in the park, a few drinks with Gonet and the gang. Happiness radiated in our togetherness. I wanted to involve Colette in my work so that we would share as much as possible. She too was anxious to be a part, but I did not want her to be just the little lady standing in the tall painter's shadow. Oh my God. She was too intelligent, sensitive, and energetic to play such a role. Therefore, I resolved to make her an integral part of the business of an artist, a sort of agent dealer with a salary and a commission. Her brief apprenticeship began one day in my studio in Montmartre. A prominent art dealer from New York came to the studio to look at several of my paintings. Colette greeted him and served him wine, and he seemed to be interested. We took him to Colette's apartment to show him three beautiful framed ballet paintings. He was more impressed with the ballerinas than with the waifs, but I suggested that we also view four additional works on exhibit in a Paris gallery. While inside the gallery, we observed that a buyer purchased one of my paintings for 3 times the price which it would have sold in New York. Colette, the visiting art dealer, and I observed the transaction and the buyer's enthusiasm at having bought Keane. Oh, that was a clunky transition. A Keane painting for a very reasonable price. Outside the gallery, the New York dealer asked me how many paintings I would consign to him. None, I replied. Then I informed him that if he wished to pay cash, he could purchase any of my works. I also assured him that I would sell the paintings at prices allowing him to make a big profit on the resale in New York. He promised to get back to me after consulting his headquarters. Leaving the dealer, Colette and I went over to our favorite bar and had a talk. I told her that the dealer had probably been very surprised, as we were, at the high price paid for my painting by the buyer in the gallery. Most artists are aware that art dealers sell their works at much higher prices than they ever realize. For example, an artist may give a painting to a dealer to sell for $7,500. What do you got, bruv? In my case, I would collect 2/3 or 5,000. The dealer would then sell it for 12,000 and hope that I would never know. Does he? Do you know Cal Brewer? Was that his name? Jesus loves you. Hello, what's up, Robs? The dealer would then sell it for 12,000 and hope that I would never know. Colette listened attentively. She understood immediately how much more profitable it would be for her and me to sell the paintings ourselves. We then discussed how to handle buyers from other countries. What do you got, Brubs? Several weeks later, Colette Gonet and some other artist friends persuaded me to rent a larger flat so that I might have a studio in conjunction with our living quarters. It was a complex of 7 rooms on one floor of the Isle Saint Louis, overlooking the Seine. Thanks, buddy. What you doing? Keep it up. Right. Located within a 5-minute walk from Notre Dame and a 10-minute walk from our bar and Luxembourg Gardens, the flat had 2 entrances, one into a large living room with a fireplace, and the other entrance into a huge, quiet room with good light. I decided that the second of these should be my new studio. Our new living arrangement not only allowed Colette to become more involved in the business, but it also facilitated her supervision of Renee. For the first time since we three had been together, Renee had her own room and a piano on which to take the music lessons I had been promising her. She was thrilled. Now I could really concentrate on teaching Colette the eccentricities of the art world as I understood them. She learned how to exhibit my paintings. When a buyer reached the point of favoring 2 works over the others, she removed all except those 2 from our living room gallery. Then she served him a drink and hung or placed the 2 paintings on an easel so that no glare would hit them. If the prospective client appeared to prefer one of the 2 works, Colette would remove the other painting and serve the individual a second drink. Shortly, she would ask him if he wanted to take the painting with him or if he wished to have it forwarded by Air Express. If the buyer were unknown to us and asked to pay by check, Colette would insist on sending the painting to him so that we could clear the check. Within a few months, Colette had assumed the responsibilities of greeting buyers and dealers, exhibiting the paintings, and making the final arrangements for sales. She showed much initiative and skill in her dealings. In fact, she became such a crafty entrepreneur that she seldom needed to consult me. At the end of a busy and lucrative day of sales, she would often recount incidents which had transpired in my home studio without my knowledge. She told me about a dealer who had questioned my dedication and interest in my work. He was obnoxious, she commented. He could not believe that you actually paint through the night. I said, I often set my alarm clock at 3 or 4 o'clock in the mornings so as to stop you so you will get some rest and not collapse at your easel. He must still have doubted your integrity because he said he could stop all that and make our lives easier. He wanted to hire you to paint for him exclusively, like 9 other artists who work for him 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. He even tells you what to paint. Then he took out a contract and told me to get you to agree to a sign. He offered me $1,000 if I could persuade you to be part of his operation. Not surprised by anything Colette reported, I listened patiently, almost breathlessly. She continued, to top it off, Walter, that damn dealer had the nerve to say that he wanted to commission you to do a painting of the crucifixion portraying Christ on the cross with big, sad, keen eyes. That did it. I told him to get out. I assured Colette that she had handled the situation very adequately. She knew me well enough to realize that I would never be interested in mass production art. She was concerned, however, that she might be alienating important prospective clients. Walter, I'm learning that painting can be a cold blooded business. Inside your studio, it's all creativity and inspiration. Outside in the street, it's a cutthroat operation based on francs, pounds, dollars, pesos, guilders, or yen. I've told more than one buyer not to come too near to me. I'm afraid that I may be making bitter enemies of them. Colette's fears were unfounded. She was a perfect saleslady, combining just the right proportions of charm, persuasion, and pressure. A few weeks later, she sold one of my paintings for the highest figure yet, more than the Paris art dealers were getting. Exclaiming over the good news, she laid the money on the paint stand. Totally absorbed in my work, I neither saw nor heard. She wrapped her arms around me and purred, "Time out for love." I put my arms around her, soiling her blouse with paint. Again, she showed me the money and reported the good news. "Wonderful, sweetheart. You can buy yourself 1,000 blouses," I said. "I can get the paint out of this one," she responded as she removed her blouse. Her beautiful breasts were aiming at me. I leaned over and quickly kissed each nipple. The following morning, she brought out breakfast to bed, where we talked and caressed each other for hours. Apparently, this is NC 17. "Colette, you may have that money to do with as you like," I told her. She refused. "Then we must do something special with it," I said. "Let us put it into a savings account for Renee. When we have accumulated 25,000 US dollars in her account, we will set up a trust fund for her college education." Walter, what a wonderful idea. You are so thoughtful, and you have made us both so happy. Except for when he left for months and banged a hot Asian. But that's okay because he's such a nice man. Now the doors of the art world had begun to open for me. Colette and I began appearing at social events, chic restaurants, and theater performances. Film celebrities, politicians, and entrepreneurs from Europe and America were acquiring my works. I met Picasso and Dali, as well as other writers, poets, and painters. Colette accompanied me throughout Europe for exhibitions of my paintings. Always the gracious hostess, she charmed prospective buyers with her poise, charm, and beauty. I made certain that she had the best gowns, Christian Dior, for our receptions. We were happy because we were a real team. While we were away from Paris, Renee had excellent supervision from her grandmother and uncle, Coppers, an uncle who continued to take her to school, ballet classes, and piano lessons. At first, Colette and I greatly missed our little 3-minute evening talks with her on the interesting events of our day. Consequently, I bought Renee a beautiful pink diary so she could pretend we were there. Instead of telling her adventures, she could write down the most exciting events. When we returned home from a trip, we devoted our initial 2 days back in Paris exclusively to Renee. Renee Days, we called them. During those times, she performed a new dance on a special stage with a spotlight I had rigged, or she might read, play a piano selection, or, or, motherfucker, or, or she might read, play a piano section, or tell from her notes the most interesting experience while we had been gone. As a rule, Colette and I were away from Renee for 2 or 3 weeks. We maintained daily telephone communication with her and her grandmother. Until that time, our trips had been limited to countries of Europe. Then came an extraordinary opportunity for a 5 week exhibition of my paintings in Tokyo, Japan. Excited as I was to be able to take my work to Asia, I reluctantly decided that Colette should stay behind with Renee. I reasoned that 5 weeks without either of us might be a real hardship for a young child. Further, I knew that phone calls would be more difficult to make, almost near impossible. For 3.5 months prior to the exhibition, I flung myself nonstop into a storm of painting night and day. Without Colette to feed, bathe, and massage my right shoulder, back, and arm, and forcing me to sleep, I probably would never have arrived at the moment of departure for Japan. Several days before I was to leave, Colette announced, "Walter, I'm going with you." Startled, I replied, "You come up with the right words just when I need them. Your happiness and peace of mind are very important to me." But What about Renee? Mother and I had a long talk. She too feels I should join you. She loves Renee and will take good care of her. But after this trip, Walter, please promise me we will take a breather. Happily, I agreed that we would indeed rest and relax with Renee when we returned. 3 days later, we arrived in Tokyo. Once the exhibition was set up, Colette and I settled into our customary routine of hard work and long days. She remained from 8 to 9 hours at the gallery to greet prospective buyers and to sell my paintings. I appeared there for 2 to 3 hours daily and spent the rest of my time painting on the streets or in our hotel room. We always arranged to have lunch together and tried to spend some part of the evenings exploring the neighborhood and savoring what little we could of Japanese life. I think our most enjoyable activity was the Japanese massages, which each of us had at least twice a day. As the weeks passed, I often saw Colette sitting by the telephone for hours, waiting for the operator to call and say, "Your party is on the line." The first 2 weeks, she got through only 3 times. I sent Renee long overnight cables every day, telling her of some funny thing that happened. "Colette, please come here. Renee is on the telephone," I called to her excitedly. Wrapped in a towel from her bath, she took the receiver from me. I took a walk so they could have a quiet visit together. On my return, Colette was depressed. Renee said that her grandmother was ill and may need surgery. Uncle Maurice and his houseboy from French Morocco will be staying with Renee until I return. I said, "Colette, there's no problem. You will leave in the morning for Paris." She shook her head. "The exhibit will close in 9 days, and I want to continue here. Nothing could happen to Renee in such a short time. Please go to her, darling. I'll wind things up here, up her." He talks like a southerner. "Up here and be back in Paris in 2 weeks. We will be finished here in 9 days," she blurted out. "I just thought if you returned to Paris, I would go to Osaka for a few days before returning." Tears formed in her lovely eyes. "I know, then Hong Kong, Tahiti will be next, and, sweetheart, if you wish, we will leave together in 9 days for Paris." I made plane reservations and sent Renee a cable of our arrival date. 5 days before our departure for Paris, Colette spoke with Renee and her uncle Maurice. Maurice explained that a business trip would take him to London for 3 days, but Jacques, his houseboy, would take good care of Renee. "He's a good boy," Maurice assured her. "He's just 20 years old, but he's been with me a year and a half, and I trust him." Colette hung up the telephone, looking anxious and concerned. "Darling," I said, "you're going home on the first flight out." I picked up the telephone, asking the desk clerk to connect me with Air France. "Sorry, sir, you'll have to try in the morning." "Then get me Pan American or SAS. Anybody." "Sorry, sir, they're all closed until morning." Colette reminded me, "Tomorrow there will be only 4 more days before the exhibition closes. By the time I got home, Maurice will be back from London. I'm going to wait. We will go home together." I put my arms around her and kissed her, but she stepped back. "I'm a bit nervous and upset," she apologized. "Then go home," I insisted. "No, you'll disappear for months." What a bastard. Exhausted, Colette drew a hot tub. I called for 2 Japanese girls to massage us. Colette fell asleep. I asked her masseuse to stay the night and instructed her to massage Colette if she should awaken during the night. Colette slept restlessly. During the following 3 days and nights, she was nervous and irritable. As she was not sleeping well in the night, she tried to compensate in the day. She would not go to the gallery with me, so I went alone to the exhibition. When I returned in the early afternoon, she was confused and disoriented. What little sleep she had was disturbed by nightmares, from which she would awaken calling Renee's name. I knew now that she had a premonition. She sensed impending disaster for her daughter. On the fourth morning, I took her in my arms and said, "My love, my precious love, tell me." She said, "I will wait and return with you. You are free to go or to stay, my darling. Please remember that I am not your enemy. I am your friend. I do not know what is troubling you so much, but I want you to know that I love you and want to help in any way I can." We were startled by a knock on the door. A cable had arrived from Paris. Renee, struck by automobile, in American hospital. Grandmother with her, Maurice. After an initial scream, Colette became numb and seemed unable to comprehend or to communicate. I arranged the flight immediately. She would go to Vienna with a connection via Air France to Paris. On the way to the airport, she remained silent. I obtained permission to accompany her onto the plane, where I enlisted the sympathy of the head stewardess, who promised to take personal care of Colette. Within a week, I arrived in Paris and went directly to our flat. Colette was not there. The concierge informed me that she had gone to the hospital 4 days before and had not returned. Immediately, I called the hospital and learned that Renee was still unconscious. I was stunned. The Tokyo cable had said that her injury was minor. The nurse to whom I talked told me that Renee was receiving the best of care and that Colette and her mother had left the hospital an hour ago. Too exhausted and distraught to think straight, I showered and went to bed. 11 hours later, I nearly collided with Colette in a corridor of the hospital. He raped her, she shouted. He raped my baby. Oh my God, I exclaimed. How terrible. Who is this monster? Somewhat calmer, Colette related the terrifying story. It appears Renee was raped by Jacques, the houseboy, while Uncle Maurice was in London. She ran from the house screaming, her arms reaching out to the first passerby to protect her. Not even noticing the concierge nearby, she ran in front of an oncoming auto. The concierge saw the accident and remembered that when Jacques and Renee returned from school earlier, Renee appeared very upset, not her usual self at all. There were screeching brakes all around. 3 cars crashed. Renee lay in the street unconscious. The concierge was the first on the scene. Pedestrians and motorists stopped, and many offered their help. The police arrived quickly, and at last the ambulance. Jacques was seen leaving the building only to disappear suddenly under a bright sun. Putting my arm around Colette, I opened the door to Renee's room. My old friend, Dr. Henry, was at Renee's bedside. Anxiously, I asked him how seriously she was injured and exactly what was wrong with her. The doctor replied, Walter, there are no broken bones, only a nasty bruise on her right cheek, and several black and blue marks on her left buttocks. Much more seriously, she was violated. Only when she regains consciousness can we tell the extent of the mental damage. Colette and I kissed the motionless cheeks of Renee and sadly left the room. Outside, I said, My darling, I'll take care of you and Renee. We'll give her a new life. As I spoke, Colette regarded me dully. There was no verbal response. Colette, let's go home, I urged. She refused to return to our apartment, preferring to stay with her mother, who was soon to have surgery in the same hospital. We parted at the curb in front of the hospital. Colette stepped into her taxi, leaving in one direction. I took a cab, heading in the opposite direction toward our apartment. The whole scene was surreal and dreamlike. I could not believe it happened. Inside the apartment and alone, I searched for and quickly found Renee's precious pink diary. Almost afraid of reading the most recent entries, I opened it. Sunday. Grandmother may go to the hospital, so Uncle Maurice and his houseboy Jacques arrived today to babysit me until Mama and Walter return. Grandmere returned to her home a few hours ago. Monday, Jacques asked me if Walter and Mama bashed together. Told him yes. Then he asked me if I had ever seen Walter nude. I answered no. I have only seen him in shorts in our apartment or on the beach. Tuesday, Jacques had a hot bath ready for me today when we returned home from my school. He washed me all over with oil and soap. Then he took a king-size bath towel and patted my body dry. A few minutes later, he made me promise never to tell anyone about the bath he gave me. I promised. Saturday. This is the 5th day in a row that Jacques has given me a bath. He still makes me promise never to tell anyone. How strange. Jacques always bathes me before Uncle Maurice comes home for dinner. Also, Jacques has been kissing me goodnight on the lips for about a week. Jesus Christ. Monday, this afternoon, Jacques sat in the rocking chair while he wiped the water from my body with the same huge towel. He sat me on his lap. Oh, I'm not going to read that part. I will not read that part. If you can see it, you can see it, but that's not appropriate to be reading on there. Tuesday, my bath as usual. Jacques told me Uncle Maurice will be leaving for London tomorrow. Wednesday, Jacques picked me up at school a few minutes early. As soon as he walked into the apartment, he blah blah. I'm not going to read that. I will skip over it. Suddenly, there was heavy knocking on the front door. We quickly dressed. Jacques smiled at me and said, "We are like actors performing in the theater." He said, and that was he said that was all in fun, like a rehearsal for my baller class or ballet class baller. With firmness, he put a finger on my lips and again made me promise not to tell, or he would spank me hard. I wanted to scream from fear. The knocking continued louder. I ran and opened the door. It was Walter's artist friend, Gonet. He asked as he walked inside when they would be back. When will your mama and Walter return? I told him in 4 or 5 days. Gonet invited me out for a lovely dinner. Jacques interrupted, saying that he had already started to prepare dinner. Gonet invited himself and proceeded to drink 2 bottles of wine by himself. Long after I went to bed, Gonet fell asleep on the couch. He was still there when Jacques took me to school the next morning. Thursday. On the way home from school, Jacques said Uncle Maurice telephoned from London and said he would arrive in Paris tonight about midnight, and to tell you he was bringing you a present. Putting the key into the door, Jacques looked down into my eyes and said as he entered the apartment, "I have a big present for you." Diary, I have to close for now. Jacques just called and said my bath is ready. I was sick with shock and unable to sleep. Renee was like my own daughter. I loved her. The daughter you left back in, where does he live? California. Hasn't seen in months. The following morning, I returned to the hospital. Dr. Henry greeted me. Renee regained consciousness during the night, but does not even recognize her mother. We call it amnesia. She is unable to recall or remember. Frankly, I feel the only hope of finding a cure is with the help of a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists believe certain broad principles hold true in treatment of all types of mental cases. They try as far as possible to work out the emotional problems that have played a part in bringing on the illness. Sometimes the lost memory returns either slowly or all at once. Sitting beside the bed, Colette lifted her head. She was shaking as she cried out, "Renee's half dead." I've held her hand in mine. She doesn't recognize me, and it's the 10th day. I tried to bolster Colette's spirits and her mother's courage, but I realized how frightened they were. I hoped Colette's mother could lend a strong hand. She and I walked out together. I asked her, "What shall we do?" There was no reply, only a penetrating stare. Dr. Henry said he had never witnessed anything like Colette's emotional state and suggested we take her home and give her a sedative. She stared blankly at me and said, "It's your fault. You dragged me all over Europe and Japan, leaving Renee alone. This wouldn't have happened if I had been home with her." She wept, beating my chest with her small fists. I wept too. I wept too. "It was your desire to accompany me on the foreign exhibition," I reminded her gently. My words had no effect. More frustrations and anger erupted. Colette had flashes of fear. She stood rigid with bitterness. Her eyes were full of tears, shouting cruel words, and her look unbearably naked. I felt like she had planted a dagger in my heart and twisted it. I pleaded, "Please, Colette, come home with me." There was a blind silence. She was gone. Dr. Henry warned me that Colette's reactions were abnormal. It may be necessary for both mother and child to receive psychiatric care. Colette has a feeling of guilt and a severe depression. She is developing a serious negative self-image. Sexual abuse such as this among family or friends has been common for years. Rape is usually committed by a stranger and occurs only once, whereas incest involves sexual abuse among family members and can continue for years. I replied, "I want you to help in any way I can. I want to help in any way I can." Shortly afterward, Renee was transferred to a special hospital better equipped to help her. She showed no signs of improvement. She was there for 3 weeks. Every day I went to see her, sometimes encountering Colette and her mother. They never spoke to me. Then one day I found Renee gone. Colette had taken her away. For days I telephoned Colette's mother in an effort to locate them. One day I went to her mother's home. "Is Colette here?" I asked as she opened the door. She shouted, "No." If I had them on radar, I wouldn't tell you where they are. Now go. Weeks passed with no news. I called all the hospitals. Having no success, I went to my pub and asked Gonet and the other artists to help me search Paris and the outlying areas. I hired a private detective. His expensive search resulted in nothing. Continue, I persisted, exhausted, tired, and lost. I returned to my studio, painting and drinking until 3 a.m. One night in disgust, I threw down my brushes, poured myself another whiskey, absent mindedly left my studio door open, staggering across the Place de Tetra. Tertra, drink in hand, I arrived in front of the Sacre-Cœur church overlooking Paris. I threw my empty glass down the hill, then cupped my hands to my mouth, shouting, Colette, 4 months have passed. Where are you? I sat down, leaning against the wall, waiting for my strength to return. Finally, I stood and called out again, Colette, where are you? Lights turned on in an apartment. Below, like a mirror, reflected the stars overhead. A voice called out, Go to bed. Another shouted, Go to Madame Fabian's house. Limping back to my studio and finding the door open, I cried out, Colette, you're here. No, Colette. My shirt was wet. I dreamed it was blood dripping from my broken heart, only to discover when I awoke that it was only dirty sweat. Over coffee, I recalled the last words Colette had said to me were, My life has no light. The only clue that ever reached me was provided by a man of the church. He claimed not to know of Colette's whereabouts, but said she found herself deeply concerned with God and the belief and practice of religion. Heartbroken, I returned to the hospital to pay Renee's bill. I happened to see Dr. Henry one last time as I was leaving. With patient sincerity, he gave me his final counsel. Walter, you have had enough sacrifice and hardship for now. You must take a long rest and be satisfied that you extended your love, understanding, friendship, and generosity. You have done all that you can. Now go and eat, drink, sleep, and amuse yourself. Watch the booze and the women. Most important, continue your search and your painting of the lost children. That is the task you love. I listened, but at that point I could not really hear. I only knew that I found Colette and lost her again, probably forever. I thought that could never again that I thought that could never again love with the intensity and depth that I had felt for her. Life seemed meaningless. I wondered if it was worthwhile even to go on. Probably not. See how long this next chapter is. Seems pretty damn long. 10 pages? I don't think I'm doing it. Not tonight. How long is this book? 200 and some pages. Yeah, no use of continuing. That's all, bro. That's all. How do I shut this thing off? Oh, there it is.